Good morning, guys. Happy Monday. So today we start week 2 of our Unit 1 reader, and the first, the only story, no, there is a short story, but the main story in this week is called The State Government and Its Citizens. I'm going to highlight my title so I know that I've paid attention to what I'm going to read about. And I immediately have a text-to-text connection with last week's story about solving problems and the different levels of government and how the government helps its citizens. So there's some familiar words in the title from what we read last week. Before I start reading, I'm going to do a quick look. I don't have to look far because we already know from the title probably what the genre is, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of flip my book and notice some of the text features. I've got some real photos that talk about the state's needs in different states, how they have different needs. And I have photos at the bottom that are, I see the word governor, state legislature, state Supreme Court. And I'm not even going to look any further because we won't go too much further than that today. But I want you right now at the top of your page to write F for fiction or NF for nonfiction. Based on what we've seen so far in the title of our story, is this a fiction text or a nonfiction text? Go ahead and write that. And if you wrote NF for nonfiction, you are correct. Based on what we've seen, we are going to learn real information about our government and its citizens. Starting with paragraph 1, I'm going to begin reading and make sure you've got a highlighter or your pencil ready to make some annotations, some notes. In the United States, the national and state governments work together to help its citizens. This sounds very familiar to last week, to that connection I already had made from the title. We learned about that last week. This system of shared powers is known as federalism. Federalism is probably a new word for most of us, but it's nice because they give us the definition right here. It's the system of where the powers are shared. And so that's probably important if they just straight up told us what it means. They didn't make us make an inference and kind of figure it out. They told us. They want us to know. The 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution helps define how the two governments work together. 10th Amendment of the Constitution. That might be important, and we know that it's going to tell us how the governments work together. James Madison, nicknamed the father of the Constitution, further explains this relationship in the essay published in the Federalist. Now, every week we kind of talk about main idea of each paragraph and then the main idea of the whole text and those supporting details. In this paragraph, we talk about a few different things, and I don't notice a main idea kind of stated in the beginning or the end. The first sentence talks about how the governments work together to help their citizens, but the title is the state government and its citizens. So I don't think that's necessarily the main idea of this paragraph. This paragraph to me sounds more like an introduction. So it's just letting us know what we're going to learn about. So I'm just going to put that out to the side, that it's just an introduction. I'm going to put intro as an abbreviation. And I'm going to move on to learn about how this relationship works. So we're going on to paragraph 2. The federal government cannot meet all the needs of all Americans. So by itself, the federal government, it can't do it. It needs some help. So the Constitution says that each state is responsible for protecting the lives and liberties of its own citizen. So we have each state being responsible for its own citizens. Also, different states have different issues. That makes sense. For instance, I love here how we have this evidence-based term. They're going to give us some examples. Water conservation is a big issue. Yeah, let's do water conservation in California because of the severe drought there and its effects on the state agriculture. Now, I don't know about you guys, But I absolutely just had a text to world connection because right now there's a lot of fires out west due to those droughts. In Wisconsin, protecting livestock is a major concern because dairy farming is a major industry in that state. Each state government responds to the specific needs of its citizens. So, as we read this paragraph, we have some details, some things that were important they wanted us to know highlighted. We know the federal government cannot meet all the needs of all of its Americans. That's a lot of people. So we learned that the state is responsible for protecting its own citizens. And we understood that that means each state has different needs because they have different issues. So it sounds to me that these specific details they've given us support the idea that each state government responds to the specific needs of its citizens, and that wrapped up my main idea for paragraph 2. So notice here that the main idea was listed at the end of the paragraph. It summarized for us what we just read about. We just read about how each state responds to the needs of its citizens and their own issues. Later today, we'll come back and we'll look at some of these non-fiction text features, but we're going to go on to paragraph 3. Like the federal government, each state has its own constitution, which is a plan for a government. Each state has its own constitution. That's pretty interesting. And I like here that they tell me that that is a plan. A constitution is a plan for the government. So we have a constitution that's the plan for the whole nation, our big constitution, but then each state has its own mini constitution. The Constitution explains the structure, the role, and the work of the state government. In the United States, state governments are modeled after the federal government. So they kind of plan it and they model it the same. However, I like this word, however. It tells me that this and this might explain some differences. I know that they're modeled the same, however, most citizens have more contact with state and local governments, let's underline that, than they do with the federal government. And that makes sense. It's much easier for us to contact our governor or state officials than for us to contact the president, right? The president's kind of a hard guy to get a hold of. The state and local governments handle state and local police, schools, and libraries. So, what we've learned in this paragraph is that each state has its own constitution. We learned what that means. A constitution is a plan. And that most citizens have more contact with state and local than federal. Okay, and then we learned here what these state and local governments do. We learned that that's the government that handles our state and local police, schools, and libraries. So I want you to think about the main idea of paragraph 3. What do you think this paragraph was mostly about? Yeah, I think you're right. I think that mostly it's about the idea that we have more contact with state and local governments than with federal governments due to what they are in charge of. Good job. Now, in a nonfiction text, we also have bold printed subheadings. So we have our big heading, which is our title, but then we have bolded subheadings. And these are really nice because I know when I read the 3 branches of state government, I know exactly what I'm about to learn about. So it's really important that we pay attention to these subheadings or these subtitles. No 2 state constitutions are exactly alike. I wonder why they're not exactly alike. What have we learned so far in our text that would explain why they're not alike? I think maybe it's because they have different needs. That makes sense to me because we just learned that. But they are all the same in one way. Each constitution divides the state government into 3 branches or sections. They are the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. So the federal government has the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And each of our states follow those same structures. I wonder what each of them do. Here it shows us that the governor is our executive branch. So I wonder who the executive branch would be on the federal level. If the governor is our executive branch, I bet it's the president. Legislative branch, that's a very big word I'm not sure about. And judicial branch. Oh, I see state Supreme Court, judicial, judge. So maybe these are the judges. Let's see if we're right. And I do want to summarize real quick. Sorry, guys. Let's go back to paragraph 4. So in paragraph 4, we've learned that our main idea is that there are 3 branches of government. We'll say state government. And that is my main idea. Okay, we're going to stop here is what we're going to do. And then in small groups today, we'll read a little bit more to find out what these 3 branches of government do. Because we have an idea of 2 of them, but one of them's a little bit fishy still because it's a really big word that doesn't have any clues inside of it. So as we come together today, we're going to continue to focus on the main idea with those key details, those important details that help us understand the main idea of what we're reading. And this stuff is a little bit complicated, so we need all the help we can get. We'll see you guys in just a little bit.